I wish I knew how I killed him though. Something inside me told me that I had to do it, like demons.
The person you're hearing is Omaima Nelson, just 23 years old. On December 1st, 1991, she sits across from investigators, composed and deliberate, while recounting something almost beyond belief. And then she tells them this.
I have confession.
I'm sorry?
I have confession. I don't remember how I killed him. All I remember, I get up like I did, and I find him in a trash bag.
The him she's talking about is her husband of just 1 month. But here's what makes this moment even more chilling. She's not confessing to murder. She's describing it like she discovered someone else's crime, like she just stumbled upon her husband's body cut into pieces in her own apartment.
Two women, there is blood all over them, and you want to say, he must die, he must die.
But what these investigators are about to uncover in a quiet Costa Mesa apartment will become one of the most disturbing cases in California history. A case that would draw immediate comparisons to Jeffrey Dahmer, whose crimes had shocked America just months before. Because Omaima Nelson hadn't just killed her husband on Thanksgiving Day, 1991. What she did in the days that followed would push past every boundary of human comprehension. Our story really begins at 4:30 p.m. on December 1st, 1991. A man named Jose Eslava picked up the phone and dialed 911. His voice trembled as he reported that a friend had confessed to killing her husband and was trying to pay him $75,000 to make the evidence disappear. He also told the dispatcher that this friend claimed she'd been abused, a detail that might explain why she believed the violence had reached a breaking point. Police reacted immediately. Within minutes, Costa Mesa units were searching for the woman Jose described, driving her husband's bright red 1975 Corvette. When they located the car and pulled it over, they found 23-year-old Omaima Nelson behind the wheel, calm, polite, and seemingly unsure why she'd been stopped. But in the back seat, officers noticed several unusually heavy trash bags. When they looked inside, it became clear these weren't filled with household debris. They contained human remains. Before we go any further into that terrible December night, we need to understand who Bill Nelson was. Because he wasn't just a victim in a headline, he was a real person with a full life. William Edwin Nelson, everyone called him Bill, was 56 years old. He'd grown up in a different America, joining the Marines as a young man and serving his country with pride. After his military service, he became a pilot, flying small aircraft and living what many would consider an adventurous life. But Bill's adventurous side had gotten him into trouble. According to court records, in the early 1980s, he was caught smuggling drugs and electronics from Texas into Mexico. He served 4 years in federal prison, a mistake that would follow him for the rest of his life. By 1991, Bill was trying to rebuild. He worked part-time as a computer programmer and messenger at Cannon Mortgage in Tustin, California. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. He lived in a modest apartment in Costa Mesa, and his pride and joy was that red Corvette, a classic car he kept in perfect condition. Friends described Bill as old school, in the best way. He still believed in opening doors for ladies, in proper courtship, in doing things the right way. He'd been married before and had grown children, some of whom were actually older than the woman who would become his final wife. On Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 1991, Bill called his stepdaughter. He was cheerful, talking about the turkey dinner he'd made with all the fixings. Everything was perfect, he said. Life was good. Nobody would ever hear Bill Nelson's voice again. Now that we know a little more about Bill, it's just as important to understand the woman who would ultimately become his misery. And for that, we need to travel far from California, all the way to southern Egypt in 1968. That's where Omaima Arey was born, one of 16 children in a struggling family near the Sudanese border. Life in that village was hard for everyone, but especially hard for girls. Omima's father was violent, with a temper that exploded without warning. According to psychiatric reports from her trial, she suffered severe abuse from the time she was a small child. But the worst trauma came when she was 7 years old. Following local custom, Omima underwent female circumcision, a brutal procedure that left her in constant physical pain. For the rest of her life, any form of physical intimacy would be a source of terror and agony rather than connection or pleasure. When Omima was still young, her mother made the brave decision to divorce her abusive husband. She took her children and moved to Cairo, to a neighborhood that sounds like something from a nightmare, the city of the dead, where the living make their homes among tombs and cemeteries because they can't afford anywhere else. Despite everything, Omima grew into a beautiful young woman. She had striking dark eyes, olive skin, and a smile that could light up a room. And when she was 18, she thought she'd found her ticket to a better life. His name was Roger Steinbrook, an American oil worker on contract in Egypt. He was older, established, and most importantly, he could take her to America, the land of opportunity, where she could escape her past and build a new future. They married quickly, and Omima found herself on a plane to Texas. But America wasn't the dream she'd imagined. Roger and Omima's marriage fell apart almost immediately. Within months, she found herself alone in Texas, a teenage girl who barely spoke English, with no family, no friends, and no way home. But Omima was a survivor. She'd survived her father's violence, survived the trauma of her childhood, and survived the poverty of Cairo. She would survive America too, whatever it took. She got jobs where she could, working as a nanny for families who didn't ask too many questions, waitressing in diners, even doing some modeling when her looks could open doors. But it was never enough to really live on. That's when Omima discovered she had a weapon that worked especially well on a certain type of man. Older, lonely men who frequented bars. Her beauty and her apparent vulnerability all combined to make her irresistible to these men. According to police records, her method was simple but effective. She would meet a man in a bar, charm him, go home with him. Then, when he was most vulnerable, she would tie him up, sometimes as part of what seemed like a game, and rob him. She'd take his money, his credit cards, whatever she could carry, and disappear. She did this multiple times throughout Texas and later California. But here's the interesting part. None of these men ever reported her to the police. Whether from embarrassment or shame, they kept quiet about being robbed by the beautiful young woman they'd brought home. This pattern might have continued indefinitely, but in October 1991, Omima walked into a bar in Costa Mesa and met a man who would change everything. Bill Nelson was sitting alone at the bar when Omima walked in. At 56, he was more than 30 years her senior, but he was immediately captivated by this exotic young woman with the fascinating accent and sad eyes. For Omima, Bill must have seemed like a typical target at first. Older, alone, probably had some money. But Bill surprised her. Instead of just wanting a night of fun, he wanted to know about her life, her dreams, her story. Within 2 days, just 48 hours after meeting, Bill proposed marriage. Even for Omima, who had seen a lot of strange things in her young life, this must have seemed bizarre. But Bill was insistent. He didn't want a girlfriend or a casual relationship. He wanted a wife. However, there was just one problem. Bill was technically still married to his first wife, but he brushed that aside as a technicality that would be sorted out soon enough. On November 5th, 1991, just 1 month after they met, Bill and Omima drove his red Corvette to Phoenix, Arizona. They found a justice of the peace who would marry them without asking too many questions. And just like that, Omima Ari became Omima Nelson. Bill took his new bride to meet his family in Texas and Arkansas. His relatives were shocked. Not only was Omima younger than some of Bill's own children, but the whole relationship seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. One day, Bill was single, The next, he was married to a woman young enough to be his daughter. But Omaima could be charming when she wanted to be. She was polite, helpful, and constantly smiling. She cooked elaborate meals and helped with household chores. By the time the honeymoon trip ended, she had won over at least some of the skeptics. When Bill and Omaima returned to his apartment in Costa Mesa, reality began to set in. The apartment was small, just a modest one-bedroom place in a working-class neighborhood. Truly, this wasn't the American dream Omaima had imagined. The neighbors would later tell investigators that the tension was impossible to ignore. Arguments erupted almost as soon as the couple moved in. Raised voices carrying through the thin apartment walls, doors slamming hard enough to shake the frames, and at least one loud crash that sounded unmistakably like shattering glass. But they also heard something else. Bill laughing, playing music, seeming happier than he'd been in years. It was like he was two different people, the angry husband behind closed doors and the man in love who couldn't believe his luck. For Omaima, the situation was becoming unbearable. According to her later testimony, Bill's old-fashioned values came with old-fashioned ideas about marriage. He wanted her to be a traditional wife, cooking, cleaning, always available to him. And when it came to the bedroom, the physical pain from her childhood circumcision made intimacy torture. But Bill didn't understand or didn't care. He'd paid for a wife in his mind, and he expected to get what he'd paid for. On November 28th, Thanksgiving morning, Bill woke up early to start cooking. He was excited about the holiday, preparing a full traditional dinner, even though it would just be the two of them. He called his stepdaughter around noon, cheerful and talkative. "I've got the turkey in the oven," he said. "All the fixings, stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes. Omaima's helping. Everything's perfect." But according to Omaima, everything was far from perfect. She would later tell investigators that Bill had been drinking since morning, that he became demanding and aggressive, that when she tried to refuse his advances, he forced himself on her. What happened next depends on whose version you believe.
Yeah, my husband? He wished.
You wish, huh?
No, I did not.
You didn't tell Jose that?
He didn't ask him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I thought that he killed somebody who had been in for years.
He was discovered with a plane full of marijuana.
He ends up doing a federal prison sentence for drug smuggling.
And stuff like that. I didn't know how to tie me up, so he stood in my shoulder like this, right here in my chest.
Fat on your shoulder?
Yeah, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't know. I didn't believe he's dead. He can't breathe.
But the evidence told a different story. The medical examiner found that Bill had been tied to the bed with such force that 2 bedposts had broken. He'd been stabbed multiple times, then beaten with a clothing iron. The killing itself had been violent and prolonged. But what happened after Bill died was what truly shocked investigators. For 3 days after Thanksgiving, Omaima worked alone in that apartment. The downstairs neighbor would later testify that she heard the garbage disposal running constantly, grinding like a motor under stress all weekend long. According to court testimony, Omaima had dismembered Bill's body with disturbing precision. The medical examiner noted that the cuts were fairly professional, so exact that investigators initially worried this might not be her first time doing something like this. But it was what Omaima did with some of the remains that would make this case infamous. Speaking to her psychiatrist, she made an admission that would shock everyone in the courtroom. She had cooked parts of her husband's body. She'd put ribs in the oven with barbecue sauce. And this is the part that made even veteran detectives feel sick. She had tasted them. "It tasted sweet," she told the psychiatrist, "just like I like it." When asked why she had done this, Omaima's explanation was rooted in ancient Egyptian mythology. She believed that if a person's body was scattered and consumed, they could never reach the afterlife. She was making sure that Bill could never hurt her again, not even in death. By December 1st, Omaima was exhausted and overwhelmed. She'd managed to dispose of some of Bill's remains, but there was still so much left. The apartment smelled terrible despite her efforts to clean. She needed help. That's when she went to Jose Eslava, a friend she'd known before marrying Bill. She offered him $75,000, money she claimed Bill had hidden, if he would help her get rid of the remaining body parts. Jose, horrified, went straight to the police. When investigators entered the apartment that night, even seasoned officers were unprepared for what they found. According to investigator testimony, it ranks as the most gruesome crime scene that I've ever encountered. The bedroom looked like a slaughterhouse. The kitchen contained horrors that defied description. And perhaps most disturbingly, when they weighed all the remains they could find and compared it to Bill's known weight, approximately 130 pounds were missing. As detectives dug deeper, a troubling new layer of behavior came into focus. After leaving Bill's apartment on December 1st, in the narrow window before police caught up with her, Omaima didn't hide or panic. Instead, she went straight to the home of another ex-boyfriend, Robert Hansen. Robert later testified that Omaima arrived agitated and armed. Without warning, she pulled out a handgun, pressed it to his face, and demanded cash. He said the threat felt immediate and real, not the actions of a traumatized or frightened woman, but of someone willing to use violence to get what she wanted. This encounter forced investigators to rethink everything. If she had threatened Robert so boldly, who else might she have targeted? How many men in her past had experienced similar intimidation, but never reported it out of fear, confusion, or embarrassment? When the trial opened on December 1st, 1992, exactly 1 year to the day after Bill Nelson's remains were discovered, the Orange County Courthouse was packed to capacity. Spectators lined the hallways, reporters filled every available seat, and news crews gathered outside, hoping to capture even a glimpse of the woman at the center of the case. The media had already branded it the Thanksgiving Massacre, a name that drew national attention and ensured that every development in the courtroom made headlines. From the beginning, Omaima Nelson's defense team didn't dispute the fact that she had killed Bill. Instead, they focused on what they claimed had led her to that night. They painted a picture of a woman shattered long before she ever met her husband, a person shaped by severe childhood abuse, cultural trauma, and years of instability. According to her lawyers, Bill's alleged assault on Thanksgiving night pushed her past her breaking point. Her psychiatrist testified that Omaima was soft-spoken, childlike, frequently sad, and often tearful. He explained to the jury that she experienced hallucinations and believed she heard voices she claimed were ancient Egyptian spirits giving her warnings or instructions. To Omaima, he said, these voices felt completely real. But the prosecution presented a sharply different story. In their view, Omaima wasn't acting out of fear. She was acting out of opportunity. They argued she had a long history of using men for money, and that Bill was simply her final target. To support their case, they highlighted several troubling facts. Her documented pattern of robbing and manipulating men she dated. Her attempt to offer Jose $75,000 to help dispose of the body. Her visit to Robert Hansen just hours after the killing, where she pulled a gun on him and demanded cash. The calm, methodical way she dismembered Bill over the next 3 days, showing planning rather than panic. Prosecutors told the jury that this was not the behavior of someone acting in self-defense or experiencing a sudden psychological break. Instead, they argued it reflected calculation, self-interest, and a disturbing lack of remorse. The jury deliberated for several days, and later some jurors admitted that it had been extremely difficult. Many sympathized with the suffering Omaima had endured earlier in her life, but they also had to confront the brutality of the crime and the choices she made immediately after. Choices that did not match the defense's portrait of a terrified, overwhelmed woman. Ultimately, The jury returned with a verdict on January 12, 1993, guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Omaima Nelson to 27 years to life in prison, a decision that closed one of the most disturbing chapters in Orange County's history, but left lingering questions about trauma, violence, and accountability that would be debated. Even in prison, Omaima continued patterns that worried investigators. According to reports, she eventually married an elderly man who had known her around the time of Bill's death. When he later passed away, he left her a significant amount of money she cannot access while she remains behind bars. She has applied for parole several times over the years. Her request was denied in 2006 and again in 2011. Her next opportunity for release is scheduled for 2026. Each time she has appeared before the board, detectives and officials from the original case have argued strongly against her release. One investigator summed up their concerns by saying, "She's doing the same things in prison that she did in the outside world." Even after 3 decades, major questions still hang over the case. One of the most puzzling mysteries is the missing 130 pounds of Bill's remains. The methods Omaima described simply don't explain where that much of his body went. Even running a garbage disposal for an entire weekend couldn't account for such a large amount of missing tissue. Investigators also questioned whether this was truly Omaima's first act of deadly violence. The careful, precise way she dismembered the body did not look like the work of someone acting for the first time. Some wondered quietly whether similar violence had occurred earlier in her life, perhaps in Egypt or Texas, involving victims who were never reported or never found. And at the center of everything is a question that still divides people. Was Omaima Nelson a severely traumatized woman who finally broke? Or was she a skilled predator who escalated her behavior over time? The jury decided she was responsible for what happened, but the debate continues among psychologists, investigators, and anyone who studies the case. Bill Nelson's family continues to grieve a man who was simply hoping for a fresh start and companionship. His stepdaughter still remembers his final phone call, cheerful, warm, talking about the Thanksgiving meal he was proud to have cooked, unaware that it would be the last time she ever heard his voice. Meanwhile, in a California women's prison, Omaima Nelson still insists that ancient Egyptian voices guided her actions on that Thanksgiving night in 1991. And in 2026, she will once again stand before a parole board, asking them to decide whether she deserves another chance at freedom. But when you look at the facts, the brutality of the crime, the missing remains, the pattern of manipulation, the threats to other men, and the years of behavior that continued even behind bars, it becomes difficult to imagine how any board could overlook the danger she has shown. Bill Nelson never got a second chance. His family never got closure, and the weight of what happened to him still lingers decades later. So the question remains, should someone responsible for such a horrific act be given the opportunity to walk free again? Or is keeping her behind bars the only true justice Bill will ever receive? Now, it's safe to say that incidents like this happening on Thanksgiving aren't exactly rare. In another case during the same holiday, a son killed his parents, dismembered them, and even boiled their remains. It was a deeply disturbing crime.
Get out now.
I ain't cleared, we not cleared this. There's blood all over it though. You want to?
Can't back out. Everybody back out.
Dismembered limbs, a head boiling in a pot, and a blood-soaked home. These were the horrifying sight that greeted officers during a welfare check at the Guy family's residence. Now, every parent dreams of giving their child the best, teaching them life lessons, nurturing them, and always keeping a protective eye, even after they've grown into adults. That was true for the Guy family, but tragically this deep bond became the very reason behind one of the most horrifying parental murders in history. Before we dive in, a warning. This story isn't for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The chilling details are not only graphic, but will shake you to your core. This is, without a doubt, one of the most brutal crimes a child could ever commit against their parents. And soon, you'll understand why. To really understand what went down, we first need to take a closer look at the parents involved. Now, if you're imagining them as strict or abusive types, think again. They were actually the complete opposite. Starting with the father, Joel Guy Sr. Those who were close to him called him Michael, so for the rest of this story, we'll stick with that name. Michael was born on February 10, 1955, and he worked as a pipeline engineer. With his experience in the field, it's safe to say he was doing well for himself. He earned a solid salary, enough to comfortably support his growing family. Anyone who knew Michael would tell you he wasn't just kind, he was the type of person who made you feel seen and cared for, always willing to lend a hand or give advice, even when you didn't ask for it. He took immense pride in everything he did, whether it was his career or his family, and he made sure the people around him felt that pride too. If you were close to Michael, you knew he wasn't just a dad or a husband. He was someone who genuinely cared and wanted to make sure everyone around him was doing well. Now, Michael had 3 daughters from his first marriage. While the reasons behind the divorce weren't entirely clear, one thing was certain. The daughters held no grudges against their father. They had always maintained a good relationship with him, and that didn't change when he remarried. Michael's second wife, Lisa, was as kind-hearted as he was. Just like Michael, Lisa was someone who made everyone feel welcome and cared for. His daughters quickly warmed up to her, and there was no drama or resentment. Lisa treated them like her own children, showering them with love and affection. This was evident when one of Michael's daughters testified in court, explaining how Lisa became a mother figure in her life. She even went as far as to get an engagement ring that resembled Lisa's. She remembered all the small details about Lisa, the favorite shirt, the favorite cups, and everything else that made Lisa so special to her.
Lisa's been in my life my entire life, and they had said it 3, but she's been my entire memory. And so we would go in the summers. My dad would have us for a month in the summer because they always lived so far away, and Angela and I would go visit for the entire month. But the dynamics of that was my mom was a single mom, so there's struggles with single moms. But when we went to Lisa's house, her cabinets were stocked with food, and she greeted Dad like the perfect Walton family. When they would come home, dinner would be cooked with meat and side dishes, and there would be candy in the shelves, and I just would watch her, and I watched her growing up like she was the mom, or that dream that you have to have a double parent home, to where she loved, like, I so wanted to be this woman that my first engagement ring was her exact engagement ring, and I wanted to be the mom she was. She would sit in her little brown shirt. She had a really high arch in her foot, and just with her cup, I wanted to even, at certain points in my life, I walked around with a cup that had like the little square placement under it, because I wanted to be her. I wanted to be the mom that she was.
Just like you just heard, this wasn't a mom who abused her children or mistreated them in a way that made them feel unloved. It's clear just from the words of her stepdaughter alone that Lisa poured love into every single member of her family. Additionally, Lisa worked in human resources at an engineering firm and was known for being reliable and generous. She was the kind of person who, no matter how busy she was, would stop to comfort a stranger in distress. She had a big heart, always putting others first. From this perspective, it was evident that both Michael and Lisa were known for their giving nature, and to everyone around them, they seemed like the perfect couple. Soulmates living a perfect life. However, everything began to change when Michael and Lisa welcomed their only biological child together, Joel Guy Jr. That moment marked the start of a shift no one could have foreseen. Unlike his warm and kind parents, Joel was reportedly the complete opposite, cold and distant to almost everyone. In fact, Joel Guy Jr.'s life before 2016 remains a mystery in many ways. Even his half-sisters, who grew up alongside him, admitted they didn't really know him. Whenever they visited, Joel would lock himself in his room, avoiding any interaction with family. On the rare occasions he did speak, he was dismissive and rude, treating his relatives as if they were beneath him. Over time, most of the family distanced themselves, choosing not to engage with Joel unless absolutely necessary. Joel's behavior was fueled by an inflated ego, believing he was the smartest person in the room at all times. This confidence was bolstered during his school years, especially when he performed well academically. In his final years of high school, he attended the prestigious Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, a magnet school known for its small elite class sizes. Getting accepted into the class of 2006 only reinforced Joel's belief in his superiority. After high school, he enrolled at George Washington University for 1 semester before transferring to Louisiana State University, where he pursued studies to become a plastic surgeon. However, Joel never became a plastic surgeon, or held any job for that matter. While he was in school, up until the age of 28, he lived entirely off his mother Lisa's income. Lisa, who worked full-time in human resources at Oak Ridge Engineering, sent her paychecks directly to Joel. Michael and Lisa decided to fully support Joel so he could focus on his studies without worrying about finances. They paid for his tuition, housing, and other expenses, hoping he'd graduate quickly and start his career. But their generosity backfired. Joel began to see this financial support not as a gift, but as something he was entitled to, his birthright. He believed his parents owed him this money simply because they were his parents. Though he claimed to be working hard toward his goals, Joel was far less focused on school than he led his parents to believe. Living alone in Baton Rouge, he spent his time doing whatever he wanted, completely oblivious to the financial strain he was placing on his family. He didn't understand or care about the sacrifices his parents were making for him. However, in 2016, things began to change. Michael, Joel's father, lost his job and took a hard look at their finances. He realized that he and Lisa could retire if they stopped supporting Joel and sold their family home. Excited for this new chapter, Michael and Lisa shared their plans with their daughters in the family group chat. They explained that they intended to move into Michael's parents' home and stop financially supporting Joel. However, they were nervous about how Joel would react to the news. At 28 years old, Joel had never been financially independent, and his parents worried about what he would do once the financial support stopped. Despite their concerns, Thanksgiving that year seemed like a turning point. For the Guy family, Thanksgiving was always a big deal, a time when everyone gathered at Michael and Lisa's home to celebrate, including their daughters, extended family, and their new families. So just like any other normal family, that year was very joyful for the Guy family. The adults gathered in the garage, enjoying their cigarettes and catching up, while the kids ran around, and the aroma of delicious food filled the house. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Now, at every Thanksgiving, there's always that one person who locks themselves away, avoiding everyone. And in the Guy family, that was always Joel. However, this year was different, shockingly so. For the first time ever, Joel actively engaged with his family. He surprised everyone by playing with his stepsister's kids, children whose names his sisters doubted he even knew before that day. He brought them upstairs to his old room and gifted them toys his parents had lovingly preserved from his childhood. Joel laughed, joked, and even posed for family photos, a rarity that caught everyone off guard. His sudden shift in behavior was so remarkable that his sisters whispered to each other about how he might finally be turning over a new leaf. What made Joel's transformation even more puzzling was its timing. Just weeks earlier, Lisa had told him that she had given her 2 weeks' notice at work. She and Michael planned to retire, sell the family home, and stop financially supporting him. Originally, they'd intended to break the news at Christmas, but Lisa decided to tell Joel early, hoping to give him time to prepare for independence. everyone braced for a meltdown or tantrum, but instead, Joel seemed fine. More than fine, actually. He appeared happier and more social than anyone had ever seen him. His family took this as a positive sign. Maybe this was the wake-up call Joel needed. Perhaps he'd already made peace with the idea of standing on his own 2 feet and was reconnecting with his family as part of a fresh start. One of his sisters even mentioned to Michael that Joel might be trying to repair their relationship. Still, Michael held firm that they wouldn't resume funding his lifestyle, no matter how well he was behaving. Little did they know, Joel's cheerful demeanor masked something far darker. While he was smiling and bonding with his family, he was also laying the groundwork for a chilling plan. That day, Joel brought over 2 large plastic tubs, which he carried into the house without much explanation. They seemed heavy, but no one thought to ask what they contained. What they didn't know was that Joel had spent weeks plotting his parents' murders. Those tubs held the tools he intended to use in his gruesome plan. As it turned out, Joel wasn't handling the loss of his financial lifeline as gracefully as he appeared. When Lisa told him they were cutting him off, Joel didn't see it as a push toward independence. He saw it as a betrayal. He decided to take matters into his own hands, crafting a plan to murder his parents, frame his father for his mother's death, and stage it all as a murder-suicide. In Joel's warped mind, he was a genius, capable of orchestrating the perfect crime. His education and endless hours of watching crime, shows like Law and Order, convinced him that he could pull it off without a hitch. But while Joel once excelled in academics, his arrogance blinded him to his own shortcomings. So, instead of heading back to his apartment like usual, Joel decided to stick around at his parents' house for 2 whole days. At first, Lisa and Michael probably thought it was a nice change. Maybe Joel was feeling sentimental about the family house before they sold it. After all, with Lisa preparing for retirement, they were all gearing up for a big life change, and the idea that Joel might actually want to spend some time with his family seemed like a nice, albeit unexpected gesture. But things took a strange turn. Just 2 weeks before Lisa was set to retire, her co-workers and boss had been planning a celebratory send-off for her. She was well-liked, dependable, and a hard worker who would always communicate if anything was off. So when November 28th came around and Lisa didn't show up for work, Jennifer, her boss, started to worry. It wasn't like Lisa to just vanish without a word, especially since she'd been so involved in the retirement celebration plans. Jennifer tried calling her several times, but there was no answer. Then she reached out to Michael, but he didn't pick up either. That was strange. Lisa and Michael were the kind of people who always made sure to check in, even if something came up. This wasn't adding up, and Jennifer knew it. So after a couple more unanswered calls, Jennifer made the decision to call the non-emergency police line and request a welfare check at the Guy family home.
My name is Jennifer Whited, W-H-I-T-E-D.
And what company are you with?
Jacobs Engineering.
And what's a good callback for you guys?
It is 865-216-6625.
Okay, what's the employee's name?
Lisa Guy, G-U-Y. Her husband's name is Joel, J-O-E-L.
Should he be there too? Does he live with her?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
And they do have a dog named Jake. I think he's a big baby.
Okay. How old is she, do you know?
She is in her, I think, late 50s.
Do you know if she has any medical issues?
No, I mean, she has high blood pressure, but that's all that I know of. Yeah, I know that their house is for sale, and they are moving, and she is leaving our company, but that's supposed to be Friday, and this definitely isn't like her just not to show up.
When the officers first arrived at the house, everything seemed normal, so they didn't think much of it and were about to call it off. But Jennifer, Lisa's boss, wasn't convinced. She had a gut feeling something wasn't right, so she called again. What they uncovered next was something no one could have prepared for. During a thorough check, the officers noticed a few strange things. The house had a "for sale" sign out front, but something seemed off. There was no lockbox on the front door for a realtor's key, and the doorknob didn't look like it had been there long. It didn't even match the door. It had obvious signs of being tampered with, likely with a screwdriver. Not wasting any time, the officers decided to check the back of the house. And that's when things took an even darker turn. The back door was missing its doorknob altogether. One officer peered through the hole where the knob should have been and was immediately hit with a blast of heat from inside the house. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a sharp, chemical smell hanging in the air. It was the kind of smell that instantly tells you something was seriously wrong. The officer looked closer and saw bottles of bleach scattered across the floor, still unopened. But the clues didn't stop there. He also noticed groceries that had been dropped at the front door, like someone had rushed inside without finishing what they were doing. That was enough for them to make their move. They headed back to the front, found an unlocked vehicle with the garage door opener inside, and used it to get access. The officers entered the house, and what happened next was all caught on body cam footage.
Hello, sheriff's office! There's Don walking there. Oh, shit.
I hear a dog howling.
Knox County Sheriff's Office!
Damn hammer.
Police! Police Department, Sheriff's Office!
The pot you saw earlier? Yeah, that was the same one Joel used to boil his mother's head for about a day. It's chilling when you think about it. Investigators first found a table with the guy's wallets and a sledgehammer on top, followed by another table with long guns. As they made their way up the stairs, they could hear a dog intermittently barking. They then spotted Michael on the floor in a hallway, and eventually discovered the dismembered bodies submerged in a solution in the bathroom. Among the other items found in the home were sewer line cleaner, a bag of baking soda, drain opener, a bottle of muriatic acid, lye, hydrogen peroxide, several bottles of bleach, a spray bottle, gloves, and trash bags. Investigators also came across a note inside an open suitcase which included the name and address of a Louisiana Ace hardware store, as well as a reference to sewer line cleaner. Given the hazardous chemicals, the Knox County Sheriff's Office hazmat team had to step in for biohazard removal. With the overwhelming amount of evidence, the KCSO Forensics Unit worked through Monday night and into the next day to process the crime scene. Now, what really happened after that Thanksgiving? On November 26th, Joel Guy Jr. attacked and killed his father in a second-floor exercise room while his mom was out shopping at Walmart. The scene was chaotic, with torn blinds, blood splattered on the walls, and an overturned Bowflex machine. The amount of blood was beyond horrific. The struggle must have been brutal. The poor man's clothes were shredded from the knife wounds, and it was reported that he was stabbed at least 40 times. However, this is just an estimate. According to the autopsy, since most of the tissue was gone when they found the body, the actual number of stabs could never be fully determined. But it doesn't stop there. Joel also dismembered the body, leaving his father's hands behind in the room. When his mom came home from Walmart, Joel tricked her into going upstairs. She was in such a rush that her groceries got scattered across the foyer. But when she reached the top of the stairs, Joel ambushed her, stabbing her in the back over and over, just like he did to his father. Blood was everywhere. The prosecution later claimed he used so much force to decapitate her that her head actually broke, and then, get this, he just chopped her up like it was nothing, then put her head in that same boiling pot on the stove. According to the medical examiner, Lisa was stabbed at least 31 times, and 9 of her ribs were completely severed. During the trial, the forensic examiner testified that the head wasn't just severed, but had been forcefully broken off. Both victims had their arms and legs detached, Mikhail at the waist and Lisa at the knees, and their body parts were placed in a bin filled with chemicals to help dissolve them. This was the very same bin that Joel had brought into the house during Thanksgiving. After death, both bodies had deep cuts made so that the chemicals could more easily penetrate the body's main cavities. So you can probably imagine how heartbreaking it must have been for both of them, loving their child and spoiling him all the way into adulthood, only for them to be brutally murdered like this. It's beyond evil. But despite Michael loving his son so much, he didn't go down without a fight. Joel sustained several cuts on his hands, including a deep gash on his left thumb. Around 3:30 p.m., he was seen in the first aid section at Walmart, buying bandages and ointment for his hand injuries. He also picked up isopropyl alcohol and hydrogen peroxide. It was also around this point that Joel returned to his apartment, likely because he was too lazy to continue with his plan. After spending 2 intense days carrying out his crime, it seems that for the first time, he was exhausted. He probably felt he had worked harder than ever before and needed a break. So, he headed back to his apartment, possibly to rest. Little did he know, it was exactly during this time that the police also uncovered what he had done. The police began questioning those closest to Michael and Lisa. When they inquired about who had been at the house that weekend, everyone pointed to Joel. His sisters revealed that he was about to be cut off financially and that his behavior over Thanksgiving had been strangely out of character. The soiled clothes found at the crime scene matched the description given by his sisters, and when investigators found a book bag containing a notebook filled with Joel's meticulous plan, it became undeniable. He was behind the murders. The only thing left to do was finalize the paperwork for his arrest. Now, the day after the bodies were discovered, Joel was arrested while heading back to the house. In his trunk, police found a KitchenAid meat grinder, a chilling indicator that he wasn't done with the gruesome process yet. But what really exposed Joel's intentions was what he had written in his notebook. From the gruesome methods of killing and dismemberment to his strategy for destroying the bodies and erasing forensic evidence, every step was carefully thought out. He planned to grind the bodies, destroy all DNA evidence with bleach and lye, and even set a fire to cover his tracks. He went as far as faking an alibi by scheduling a text message from his mother's phone, attempting to erase any evidence that could point back to him.
Get carving knives to make small pieces. Get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat.
Keep going.
Get bleach, denature proteins. Get plastic bin for denaturation process.
Keep going.
Does not matter where they're killed. Just get rid of bloody spots to prevent evidence of time of death, not the mattress or the couches. Get rid of bodies inside house. There and my DNA already there.
Joel's motive, driven by a financial incentive, was also clearly outlined in the notebook. He calculated his parents' life insurance policies, assets, and joint property with the intention of inheriting everything. His obsession with money was evident as he described in detail how he would inherit the full value of his mother's assets, including her life insurance, the family homes, and other financial resources. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Joel continued to buy supplies like knives, acid, and plastic bins, keeping the notebook hidden in his backpack alongside his school books. He made sure to pay in cash, thinking he was being smart and inconspicuous, but in reality, Joel's arrogance and sense of entitlement were his downfall. He believed his meticulous preparations would guarantee his success, unaware that he was overlooking the most basic human realities. Joel was so spoiled and out of touch with the real world that even while erasing his tracks, he grew lazy and decided to take a break from his gruesome task. He had no real understanding of the consequences of his actions, thinking he could simply get away with it. But what he failed to factor in was the kindness of his parents and how their disappearance would immediately raise suspicions. Despite the mountain of evidence stacked against him, Joel Guy Jr. still pleaded not guilty, dragging his family through a painful 4-day trial. He knew he couldn't win. It was clear to everyone that he was guilty, but he wasn't trying to win. Instead, he wanted to make his family suffer. By refusing to admit what he'd done, he kept control over them, forcing them to hear every ugly detail of his crime. It was like his final act of revenge, making them live through his cold, calculated cruelty. Even Joel's defense lawyer struggled to defend him. All they could muster was that Joel was a kind man who couldn't possibly commit such a horrific crime.
Friendly and happy, in a way Michelle Tyler had never seen him before. Outgoing, friendly, and happy. That was not a man about to commit a homicide. Outgoing, friendly, and happy.
But the jury wasn't swayed by this weak argument. On October 2, 2020, Joel Guy Jr. was found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder, 3 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, his appeal to overturn his conviction was shot down by the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals in April 2023. With that, Joel's fate was sealed. He will now spend the rest of his life behind bars at the Northwest Correctional Complex in Tiptonville, Tennessee, where he will forever live with the consequences of the brutal crime he committed. Now, remember when we first said that not much was known about Joel's past? Well, as the trial went on, a surprising revelation came to light. Joel actually had one and only one friend. People were shocked to find that Joel had a friend he cared so deeply about that he even called him in prison to apologize. That friend's name was Michael McCracken.
Have much of a chance of being happy anymore, but you do. You do. Eventually you're going to meet somebody, and you've claimed that I haven't been an albatross or anything before, but I certainly would be now. It's me in freaking prison. On that basis, I think you should probably just sort of consider me dead and move on with your life. So I'm not going to try to initiate any more contact with you beyond.
Very little is known about the nature of Joel and Michael's relationship, but it seemed that, at the very least, Joel respected him. The two met when they lived together in their high school dorms, and when Joel went off to study at George Washington University, he left after just 1 semester and transferred to Louisiana State University, where Michael was going. They ended up living in the same apartment building, and when Michael's roommate moved out, Joel moved back in with him. Some have speculated that their relationship might have been more than just friendship, but that's all we really know about the situation. When Michael was questioned about the case, he stated that he wasn't surprised that Joel had killed his parents. He explained that, over the years, Joel had become increasingly reclusive, spending weeks on end alone in his bedroom to the point where Michael sometimes didn't see him for months at a time. For whatever little comfort it may offer, Joel will spend the rest of his natural-born life in prison, exactly where he belongs. He will forever be remembered, not as the genius he thought he was, but as a gigantic fool who couldn't take care of himself and, despite his so-called wisdom, made the catastrophic mistake of leaving a notebook, a kind of manifesto, at the crime scene. But what do you think about this case? I mean, we can all agree that Joel was definitely a psychopath, right? It's hard to believe he had any real justification for killing his parents, other than his own twisted desire to live a carefree life. But Do you think there were other factors behind his actions? Was there something deeper going on that we're missing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.